Welcome to this edition of Insider Secrets, the weekly podcast that turns real estate investing goals into reality. Each show, we interview guests who are seasoned real estate professionals, actively closing and managing real estate deals. Mike is the founder of My Core Intentions and would like to help you make your real estate investing dreams a reality. Mike coaches you to buy investment real estate, creating short-term cash flow and long-term wealth. Your host and real estate coach, Mike Morawski, has more than 30 years of real estate investing and property management experience. Here's your host, Mike.
Hey, what's up, everybody? I hope that you are having a great holiday season because I know that you are hearing this sometime at the end of December and that you are in the midst of Christmas and Hanukkah and whatever else you celebrate. And I just want to wish you happy holidays. Hope you and your family are enjoying the season. Hope your year ended up well. If you're starting to look at the new year, what are you looking for? What are you looking to accomplish? I revised my goal setting and planning guide. So if you are looking to start setting some goals and thinking about next year, go ahead, follow the link in the show notes and download that guide for yourself. It'll be great to walk you through a little bit about some mindset, some shifts maybe that you need to think about for next year. This past year might have been a little bit slower for you, might not have got done what you wanted to. With the market continuing to change and look like we're going to go into an upswing, you might want to start thinking about doing things a little bit differently. And if I can help you with any of that, don't hesitate to reach out. Hey, if you're new to the show, welcome. Glad that you're here this morning. This morning, I got a twist for you, which will be very interesting. So buckle up. You're going to enjoy this one for sure. But if you're on social media, follow us, like us, love us. We're always trying to bring you some information, some golden nuggets that are going to help you scale your business, grow your business. If you're on YouTube watching us this morning, subscribe because we are always, again, bringing out good content. So whatever I can do for you to help you scale to the next level, don't hesitate to let me know. Hey, my guest this morning, Joel Friedland with Brit Properties in Chicago. He's in the industrial side of CRE. So we're going to have a little twist about things this morning. Let me bring Joel in for you. Hey, good morning.
Mike Morawski, it is so nice to see you.
How are you? Good to meet finally.
Yeah, ditto.
Hey, we were talking a little bit before the show, but I'm in Southern California where the sun is shining and the weather is beautiful and you don't miss too many days of 72 degrees. What's it like in Chicago today?
It's sunny, but two, which is not acceptable. I like double that. I like 84.
Yeah. Do you ever get out of Chicago in the winter?
I'm leaving tomorrow for Florida for a month.
Oh, nice. Good for you. Where do you
Yeah.
go in Florida?
We're heading to Sarasota, a place called Longboat Key, right off of the Gulf.
Okay. Okay. I'm not going to impose on you to drive by my properties down there and take a look at them for me. I promise I won't ask.
Oh, it's all right. I'm happy to do it.
Hey, so I always kick the show off. I ask one question of all my guests, and then we wind up in some rabbit hole. But I always want to know in one word, Joel, what best describes you personally and professionally?
Relationships.
God, what a great segue into today, I think. Why relationships?
So I have learned that it's not what you know, it's who you know. And it's also how well you know each other. Those are the two elements to me of a relationship is knowing people that share your values, really important, and also the depth of the relationships, how much you care about each other and are curious about each other. So just to give you a quick little background, I've been in industrial real estate, owning manufacturing type buildings, small ones, for about 42 years. And I've got 200 investors and I've got 24 tenants. And I know everybody personally. And one of my habits, Mike, is to make sure that I talk to at least 3 to 5 of my people every single day, whether in person or by phone.
Yeah, interesting. I think it's really important to build relationships with people. And I do a little coaching and training for multifamily investors. And that's the first thing I always teach people is you've got to build solid relationships, whether it's with brokers, whether it's with your tenant, whether it's with investors, but that's how you build your business. So I think that's great, though. Awesome. Hey, I'm honored to have you on this morning. I've been in the business 30 years. I've seen your name around, heard your name around. We run in a lot of the same circles and really haven't had an opportunity to meet. So I'm looking forward to building a relationship.
I've been on, I don't have my own podcast, but I love watching podcasts. And I really enjoy yours. And I also have been on a number of other podcasts. And what's great about them is when somebody who's a host asks questions, it forces me to think through what I really care about.
Hmm.
And so I know these things go in a direction that the host wants them to go, but as a guest, one of the things that I believe is really beneficial to anyone who watches it and to me personally, I can't speak for you, is to talk about something that no one's ever heard before and or that very few people have heard before. Start relationships with people who want to know more. So that's what's fun to me.
Yeah, awesome. And we're going to talk about some stuff that I don't normally talk about. We're going to take a little twist this morning and talk about a couple things that will be new to people. So buckle up. Hey, do this. Talk a little bit about your background over the years, what you've done, how you got into what you're doing today, and what Brit Properties is all about.
I went to the University of Michigan, which is why I love your logo because it's got two M's and they're maize and blue. So you've got the perfect logo. That's number one. After graduating from
Love that.
Michigan, I went to work for a family, a very wealthy family in Chicago that owned 80 industrial buildings. I found them through a friend and they hired me to be a property manager and a leasing agent. And I was mentored there by these two amazing older guys. One was 5 years older than I am, and the other one was 10 years older. And then the father of the one that was 10 years older was also a mentor to me. Their last name was Podolsky, and the most
Good Polish
wonderful
name.
people. Huh?
Good Polish name,
Yeah,
just like me.
yeah, they're without a doubt the most incredible teachers, and they brought me in and took me under their wing like I was a family member, and they taught me the business. Let me give you a funny story about multifamily versus industrial. Milt Podolsky, the father, who was about 60 something, like I am now, I met him and he said, Joel, I have an investor that owned a multifamily property in the Chicago area, sold it, and then came to me and said, what do I do with the money? It was about 20 million. And he said, I do industrial. And how many tenants did you have in your multifamily property? And she said, I don't know, 400, whatever it was at the time. He said, how about this? I'm going to have you invest with me in a deal where there's one tenant, same amount of money, instead of 400 tenants, one tenant. And the woman said, that would be great. So they bought a building at 131st Street in Alsip. And since you're from Chicago, you know that's the way south side over by the
Right.
Calumet River. And guess what? It was 1981. Business sucked. Interest rates were very close to 20%. And they had built this building on a speculative basis. And the woman came in and invested all of her money. And it sat vacant for 3.5 years, which means instead of getting, at the time there was a 10 cap on a deal like that, so instead of getting $2 million a year, she lost the opportunity cost of $2 million a year and had to pay the taxes, insurance, maintenance, and utilities. So Milt owned a small percentage of it, and this other investor owned the majority of it, and then they had a few other syndicated investors that had pieces. And the Podolsky said to me, we're losing $3 million a year on this thing. You go find us a tenant. And I was 22 years old. So I went out door to door canvassing to try to find tenants for their building. What I learned from this is that industrial is riskier than multifamily because you're putting more money in with one tenant. Sometimes there's a multi-tenant building. There might be 2 or 3 or 10 tenants, but it's not the same thing is having units that might be worth $200,000 each. It's a $20 million building. And these people were just so miserable. They were losing money every day. I got lucky. I found a tenant. I found Uniroyal Tires.
No
At
kidding.
the time, I don't even think they're around anymore. They wanted to put a big tire warehouse in 330,000 square feet. And they did. We had to give them a year of free rent in order to entice them to come in. And then the rent was low. 330,000 square feet at the time should have been $3 a foot triple net. and instead we got $1.95. Times were tough. So industrial is a riskier business when times are bad than what you do. But at the same time, the cap rates are higher, so the yield's higher, and it's a lot less of a hassle in terms of management.
That's kind of the same story I tell people about single family versus multifamily. I own 200 single family homes. I had 200 roofs, 200 furnaces, 200 hot water heaters, but I can own a 200 unit building and have 4 or 5 roofs, 4 or 5 hot water heaters, boilers. So I get that. I understand that. I hope people really dig into that and find the economies of scale that work best for you.
Yeah, I love the industrial business primarily because it's all I know. People are funny. They say, I love what I do. What else have you done? Oh, nothing. So I've been doing the same thing. The Chicago market has 16,000 industrial buildings, 1.5 billion square feet. And I just focus on this market because it's so vast that there's not really any reason to go anyplace else. I can be busy every minute of every day and have 15 employees busy every day just working on industrial in Chicago.
Hmm.
The thing that I love about it, though, is it's a little obscure. A lot of people don't know about it. Industrial buildings are hidden behind other buildings. You don't really see them. But the kinds of tenants that are out there are so fascinating. Do you know, for example, that the knives used by most restaurants in their kitchens are rented?
No.
I didn't know that either. So there's an industrial building in Des Plaines, Illinois, right near O'Hare Airport, where they have 60 guys working sharpening knives. So if you go to Chipotle anywhere in the country, the knives in their kitchen are reused over and over again after being sharpened every 2 weeks. So there's a company called Cozini, and they're all over there in most cities and most large cities in the country. And so if you go to a Morton's Steakhouse, their kitchen has Cozini rented knives. And so every 2 weeks, these guys have routes. They have a little van and they pick up the dull knives and they deliver identically suited, the same knives, except sharp. They bring back the dull ones to the warehouse where these guys sit there sharpening these knives. And you can only sharpen knives, I believe, 9 or 10 times before they get so thin that you have to throw them away. And then they melt them down and they make something out of them so that it's more environment friendly. Think about that. There's a business that sharpens knives and rents the restaurants. How about this one? There's a company that makes protein bars and they make them for Dannon yogurt. Dannon doesn't make their own bars. They contract it out with a company called Element Bars. It's near where you used to live on the west side of Chicago, at Western and Roosevelt, actually.
Okay.
Not too far. And so in that same building, we have a company that makes walk-in bathtubs that competes with Kohler and American Standard. So if you're one of these people who has to walk into the tub and you can't step over the side of the tub because of maybe some sort of a disability, this guy came over here from Latvia when he was a young child and not speaking any English. He learned the language and he started this business, and it's fantastic. You should see these. These are the most beautiful tubs. They have gorgeous lights and they have the sprayers. What do you call those things that are built in?
The body sprayers.
Yeah, inside, it's like propulsion. So that it hits wherever you want it to hit if you've got sore muscles or whatever. So those are the kinds of tenants that occupy the kinds of buildings we buy.
I have to say I love that. And here's what's interesting. The other night we were out, I was out at a little networking event. We were out on a boat in Newport Harbor, not to make you jealous or anything, but I always wonder, what does that guy do? And you see these big houses or these big boats and you go, what do they do for a living? I've always been curious about other businesses and what people do. And somebody said, oh, that guy owns Duraflame. Here's a business where a guy made billions of dollars off a fireplace log and nobody's ever competed against him.
Yeah.
Which just fascinates me.
We have companies here that make and distribute medical products. There's a company called Medline. There's a company that distributes packaging products. It's called Uline. All you need to do is have what you do or how your name is spelled and add the word line, and then you become a billionaire.
Yeah.
That's how it works.
What happened to Friedland?
Oh yeah, that would be a great idea. Yeah, that's what
So
these guys do. They're in all different businesses, and one guy made jewelry and became a large supplier to Target. So if you went to the jewelry counter at Target and you bought the jewelry there instead of at a fancy jewelry store, he went diving somewhere on a vacation, and when he was down there, he found some really cool stones that could be made into jewelry, and he brought them back, and he had an idea, give it to a jewelry designer, and he had these things made, and he went selling them, and they actually sold out. So he went back and got a lot more stones, and eventually created a multi-million dollar business called Sunstone. And then he sold the business a number of years later. He was in a building in Morton Grove, 100,000 square feet, and he had about 120 employees working at assembly tables.
interesting.
Yeah.
So do you just own your buildings and take care of all the maintenance and issues, or are your tenants triple net tenants?
They're triple net. And as you know from our previous conversations, I do deals all cash primarily with no debt.
Yeah, which is
And
an interesting. So explain that model to people because that might have gone over some people's heads.
yeah, so real estate is a leverage business for the most part. It's where you buy a house, let's say, and you spend a half a million on a house and you borrow 400,000 and you have $100,000 down payment. So your equity is 100,000 and your mortgage is 400,000. If we compare that to what I do, our buildings cost more. Our average building is about 3 million. So in the case I mentioned with the house, that would be an 80% loan to value. So on a $3 million deal, it would be 2.4 million of debt and 600,000 of equity. That would be the down payment. And what I've been doing the last few years is primarily buying buildings with no mortgage, where if it's a $3 million building, we actually pay the 3 million in cash and we don't get a mortgage. A lot of people think, Mike, that I'm an idiot because they say, wait a minute, real estate's a leverage business. But at my age and at my stage with a lot of experience for 40 years, my investor group, I've got 200 investors and they're mostly wealthy people, doctors, lawyers, business owners, retired people who sold their business. They're into preservation of capital. And my idea was there's nobody else doing all cash deals with no debt. Maybe there's a market for it. Beyond that, I emotionally can't take the risk of owning a building. Remember, I told you about Milt Podolsky with the
Right.
330,000 foot building vacant for 3.5 years. They had a mortgage on it and it nearly took them down. So I stay away from mortgages to the best of my ability. We did a $13 million acquisition about a month ago. We bought 3 buildings where they make fruit juice concentrate, a company called Tampico. It's actually very popular in Southern California. They're all over the world. They're in 50 countries.
Yep.
And they make this goop. It's goop. If you were to pick it up, it's like this. And they put it in containers and then they send it around the world where it's mixed with water in bottles. And it was a $13 million deal, 3 buildings on the Chicago River at Belmont and Western.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Great
Where
area.
Riverview used to be.
Directly across the street from where Riverview used to be, where Lane Tech High School is. And
We're old enough to remember that.
yes, I went there as a kid once.
Me too.
Scared the crap out of me. That thing that falls down really fast. I forgot what it was called, the bobs or the chutes or something. My
Yeah.
dad took me there. I was traumatized by the roller coasters. I was 6.
And they were wooden back then. Remember
They're
that?
wooden.
That really dates us.
So that is right across the street where that was located, which is now high schools and a public park on the river. We are just across Belmont from that on the river with 1,200 feet of frontage, which I believe one day our industrial buildings will be turned into condos. Someone will tear them down and develop condos.
Sure.
It's a multifamily play, but not for me. I'm going to call you. I'm
Yeah.
not going to do it. I'm just going to sell it one day. But 13 million was a lot to raise. I only raised 9 million because if you're raising an average of $100,000 per investor, 9 million is 90 investors. And to get 130 investors to do it all cash is really hard. I can easily raise money from my group for a 4 million or a 3 million or a $2 million building, but I've never done a 13 million. So I borrowed 4 million. If you look at 4 million as to 13 million of value, it's 30% loan to value. And that is the most that I will ever do in my future and now.
Interesting. So we have said that real estate's a leveraged business. Isn't your IRR or your return to your investors higher with debt on the property than it is when you're all cash?
Significantly higher. The difference between the way that most people operate in real estate and the way that we do is there is a magnifying effect of having the leverage. So if you buy a property for $1 million and you sell it for 2 million and it's all cash, your profit is just $1 million. And
Right.
to get that, we usually have to keep it for 7 years or whatever. Because we look at it, our average annual returns have been around 14%. But think about this, because our average cash flow is around 10% over a 10-year period on an all cash deal. So in 7 years, we've made 70% roughly, or maybe 60% on our money in cash flow distributions. And then the profit might be 30 or 40% on top of that. That's how you double the money in a period of time that's, let's say, 10 years. If you go out and you borrow 70%, then the profit, which is the 30 or 40%, is magnified. And instead of 30 or 40 on your equity, it's maybe 120%. So the IRR, or the average annual return with leverage, is likely in a successful deal to bring you to an 18 to 20% return, as opposed to the 14 that we shoot for. But my audience, or my group, is really focused on preservation of capital first, and they're really comfortable taking some risk, like with leverage deals, but not all of their money goes into highly leveraged. They look at my stuff as being like a safe harbor for some of their money so that their portfolio is diversified. Because we have single tenant buildings, our risk is higher. So having no debt is extremely important to us if the building goes vacant. Whereas if you have 100 houses, just to pick a round number, and you lose 4 or 5 tenants, you don't get slammed with, I'm not going to be able to survive this, because 95% of your homes are occupied and performing. We're either 100% occupied or 100% vacant with single tenant buildings.
Right, exactly. I have another kind of a follow-up question, just unpacking some of what you said. That story you told, multifamily and industrial, when you went to work for Milt, with knowing that pressure on a single tenant building, knowing that pressure in the industrial space, why did you stay in that space? Obviously, there's some passion or some love that you have for it that caused you to stay in that space.
Yeah. So first of all, I was a broker when I worked for Milt, and I mainly worked for his son, Steve, who's also just the most incredible real estate guy, wonderful person. I loved working for them. So part of it was I really liked working for Steve Podolsky. That was maybe the main thing. And Milt was entertaining. Steve was the serious, make good decisions guy, and his dad was, let's go. So it was entertaining having Milt, and it was educational having Steve. But working for them, it was the relationship. I loved working for them. And the deeper I got into it, the more entrenched I got with industrial brokers and industrial owners. And as an industrial broker today, if you started out as an industrial broker, you'd make probably 50,000 your first year, 100,000 your second year in commissions, take home. And by the third year, if you're really good, you're 300 or 400 or $500,000. And the guys that I've trained who've worked for me over the years, whether at Podolsky or at a later company that I started, I got about 20 guys out there that I've trained who all make 7 figures. And they can't do that in residential, because an industrial deal, if you sign a 400,000 square foot lease as a tenant, the rent today is $4 million a year. So a 10-year lease is a $40 million lease. So if I'm a broker and I bring a tenant to a landlord for an industrial building that's that size, it's 40 million, and the commission is about $1.6 million or $1.8 million. So that's one deal. Industrial is unbelievable because it's big. And once you're entrenched in the relationships, it's a system, it's a group. There's a group called the Society of Industrial and Office Realtors. There's several thousand members around the world, and it's hard to get the designation. You have to do a certain amount of volume of business. But I went to the conference. It was in Chicago this year in October, and I'd say there were 1,000 people there, and nobody makes less than $500,000 a year. Nobody. So there's 1,000 people all making $500,000 on average. The young guys maybe 250, and the older experienced guys probably 2 to 3, 4 million a year. So
Yeah.
it's a great business. And I found a little niche of buying stuff like you buy homes. I buy little industrial buildings. They're only 20,000 feet, so they're only worth 2 or 3 million. It's as opposed to a 400,000 square foot building, which is probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 million to own it. That's way over my head.
Yeah, right.
I let the pension funds do that.
Let me share a story with you that's kind of in this space, and this might be something you want to think about because maybe it helps you and your investors maybe make a little bit more money. So our mutual friend Carl Moose, who everybody may remember him and I started this show together 3 years ago, but he's in the solar business. And
Yeah.
Carl came to me about 6 months ago and said, "Hey, I have an idea." He said, "Why don't we go buy a warehouse or an industrial building? Let's put solar on it. Triple net lease back to the tenant, and we become now the power company, and we sell that electric or power back to the tenant, and it increases the return that the investor is going to see on that property." And so we've started to walk down this road and look for deals. We actually had an offer in on a deal in a building out in Woodstock, and we couldn't come to terms on the lease. We could come to terms on today's lease, but the tenant didn't want to future increases in lease terms and length of terms. Have you looked at doing any of that at
Yeah.
all or thought about it?
Yeah, we started with I have relationships, and that's what I do. I have an investor who's a seven-figure investor with me, who's been with me for a long time, and he and his partner are in the solar business.
Mm.
So I am locked and loaded with those guys. If there's anything that I do with this, we own so much real estate together, and we're so close. We have lunch every couple months together. We talk maybe once a week. I know when his kids are sick. He knows when I have a grandson who's born. The relationship is that solid, and it's exactly what he does. His name is Ira Holtz, and they're in the lighting business also. It's called Crown Commercial Lighting, and he's got a partner, and his partner is also an investor of mine. It's sort of like I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine. I do everything with them. So I love that you guys are doing that, but I am solid on that commitment to those guys for that business. But you're right, it's a fabulous thing to be able to do. Industrial is the greatest. Chicago's not as good as some other places because we don't have as many sunny days. But you guys have more out there in California, and Colorado's better, and Utah's better. So it works here, but it's not like people are clamoring to do it here.
Here's where some of the biggest impact is. It's in the credits, right?
Yes.
You get credit back from ComEd, you get state credit, federal credits. That there's where you don't get those credits here in California, or you don't get them in where I own real estate in Tulsa, Oklahoma. You get them in Illinois. I think it's Illinois, Maryland, and one other state that really have those high credit returns.
Yeah, I think it's great. And when I have a new tenant, Ira is funny. We have a building in a place called, it's right next to Rosemont. And we were meeting with a potential tenant who hadn't moved in the building. We bought it vacant and filled it up. And he comes to the meeting as the co-landlord because we're investors together. And he says to the tenant is a guy who owns, I think, 14 restaurants called the Rosebud Restaurants. His name is Mr. Dana. So says to him, "Hey, listen, if you're going to be the tenant and we're the owner, we should do the solar on the roof." And Alex Dana says, "Maybe." It's a hard sell because they're not thinking about that. They're really thinking about, how do I build my business, stay in business, make a profit, not lose my employees, not lose my customers. So you really need somebody who takes charge of that project and does it for you. But then you've got to get as an owner or a landlord to agree to do it. And one of the big problems is that when you put it on the roof, because roofing systems here need so much maintenance, that there's the question of, does it interfere with your ability to repair and eventually replace the roof. It's like when you have so many HVAC units on the roof, because most of them are rooftop, it
Right.
becomes a more complicated roof. So there's a lot of issues, but it's great. I'm not saying it's not great, but I'm so committed to Ira and to
Yeah.
Billy and his partner Billy that if they're watching this, hey guys,
I'm sure they either have or can run the numbers for you. And I look at it, I think it's a great opportunity, especially alternative to what I'm doing. And I'm like you, focused on multifamily. I like market rate multifamily. And I look at it as maybe a little side hustle.
I love it. I think it's
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Hey, so let's talk markets for a little bit. We all know 2023 hasn't been the greatest market to buy real estate in. What's your experience been, and where do you see the markets going over the next 12, 24 months?
So industrial has remained really good through this year. There's been no downturn in industrial. There has been in office because people don't have to go to work anymore. But industrial, you have to come to work because the stuff in the back of the warehouse, it's not just an office, it's a warehouse or a manufacturing building, which requires people, forklift truck drivers, assembly people, packaging people. And two things have made industrial really strong. One, the internet, every time a store goes out of business, an internet company gets a warehouse because now you're ordering from those companies online as opposed to getting in your car and driving to Bed Bath and Beyond. So as Bed Bath and Beyond went out, a bunch of companies that sell the products that used to be in that store, you can go directly to that company and order online and not leave your house. So that's been great for industrial. And over COVID, it got even better. The second thing that's been great for industrial is there's a really difficult problem going on with China and the United States from a geopolitical standpoint. We're at odds with them right now. They talk about Xi, the president Xi, and Biden, and it's a cold relationship. Stuff used to be made overseas because they could make it for one third or one half the price because labor's cheaper and everything's cheaper in China. So they would do the manufacturing there and then ship it here. And it would save companies a fortune and their margins were better. Now companies are coming back. It's called onshoring or reshoring, where what they used to do overseas, they now need to do locally because remember the supply chain, you couldn't get toilet paper, you couldn't get anything. They
Right.
need to make it here so that they're not at the mercy of some company in some country that's thousands and thousands of miles away. So they're occupying more industrial buildings with manufacturing and distribution. So our rents have gone up in the past 4 years by somewhere between 60 and 100%. That's 15 to 20% rental rate growth.
So
So it's really been too good.
yeah, that's interesting because when you look at companies like Amazon, and I told you before we got started this morning, I was working on a project in Tulsa, and Amazon in Tulsa just built their third distribution warehouse. I understand that. And just from an economic standpoint of looking at markets, that industrial piece is a piece that keeps that job growth happening and the income happening.
Industrial is the backbone of our country, really of the world. Everything is made in an industrial building. I can point out to you your headset. Who makes it?
I don't
Okay,
offhand know.
so let's say like a microphone, a Shure microphone. It has about 70 components in it. And so Shure has a place where they put them all together, but they order every single piece from some industrial building somewhere where they make the individual parts. Same
Hmm.
thing with your clothing, same thing with your furniture, same thing with everything we eat, refrigerators, the cup, the glasses, the Warby Parker, everything, the TV remote, everything's industrial. It's all made in industrial buildings, and that's not going to stop. So industrial's just been booming. I am worried that it's been overbuilt. Remember the story of Milt and the lady? So these huge big boxes defined these days as over 200,000 square feet. They're building too many of them. Too many people started all at the same time with pension fund money. And now there's going to be 10 million square feet built in the next 12 months here. I don't know if it'll all fill up, but it doesn't bother us financially very much because our buildings are little and they're closer to O'Hare and they're in the city. And those you cannot replace because to tear one down and build a new one makes no sense. So these Class B and Class C older, smaller buildings, there's a niche for them, and companies looking for them to buy can't find them because the vacancy rate in some markets is zero.
Yeah, it's interesting. What are you working on these days?
So if you ever seen one of those posts at a university or a parking garage or a hospital, it's like an emergency phone on a post. It's got like a blue light. So if some bad actors chasing after a college student on campus, there's this phone. It's an emergency phone, and the company is called Talkaphone that makes most of those. And they're in a 27,000-foot building in Niles, Illinois. And believe it or not, I used to own the building with a group of investors and sold it to Talkaphone in 2007. And the owner recently died, and his family wants to sell the building, and we're going to probably buy it back. So I'm looking to buy that $2.7 million building with Talkaphone as a tenant. It's going to give us an 8% return for 4 years and then a 9% return after that. And it's a really nice company. It's owned by a private equity group. So I've got to syndicate that. I'm going to do it in increments of 50,000 each and hopefully close that by maybe late January.
Okay. Interesting. Good for you. So if people are interested in this type of a passive investment, they could reach out to you about that.
Sure. Yeah. We are very careful as to who we bring in because, again, it's all relationships. We want to know each other before they come in. I do 506C offerings, which means we can advertise them. We can talk about them on a podcast, but everybody has to be an accredited investor or they can't come into the deal. And they have to be people that we get along with who trust me and I trust them. And otherwise it's a mess.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's funny you say that. This week alone, I told 2 people that I don't think you're a fit for us. And I don't do that because when you connect with somebody or not. And as soon as investors want you to start changing documents or doing something different, you're not a connection with that person.
Yeah, this is my draft of my new document. I've got a lawyer in Philadelphia. He's my securities lawyer. His name is Mark Roderick. And we have to be careful how we write these documents so that they're easy to read, so that the investors can understand what they're getting. Mark doesn't believe in legalese. Instead of receive, he says get. If you can say it in 3 letters, he'd rather do that than a word that 9 letters.
I love that.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
But
For a simple South Side Chicago guy like me.
Exactly. Yeah. So we have the book we put out and we send it to people. We email it over. And I like when they have a lot of tough questions. That's always the best. I like a discriminating investor who's careful. And the biggest question that they ask me that's the most important is about succession planning. Because you and I'm a little older than you, I'm assuming. When I get hit by a truck or I get cancer or whatever, they want to know that somebody's standing in line on the bench, next to the bench, ready to take over. And so people say, well, what happens if something happens to you? I know you. So I've got Eric Schneider, who's 20 years younger, and then my son Sam, who's 20 years younger than that. So there's a succession line of people who know the business and can be in charge of it if something happens to me. That's the question that's the number one stumper for most people.
That's interesting. I don't necessarily know. I think because I have a pretty strong team, I don't get that. That question doesn't come up as much. I have a great partner who handles all of the stuff that I don't have the brain power to handle. I'm a visionary and big picture guy. And when you give me a set of documents like that, I fall asleep by page 3.
You're like a Milt Podolsky. Milt Podolsky didn't have any patience for any of that stuff. And Steve Podolsky had patience for all of that stuff. So they were a great team. And he had another brother, Randy, who also was great on details. You got to have your back office. In my case, I've got 2 guys in my back accounting office who've been with me for 20 years. And without having the back office really in good shape, everything can get out of control pretty quickly.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's good that you have somebody who handles that for you.
Yeah. Listen, thanks for being here this morning. I appreciate it. This has been very insightful. What do you want to leave investors with? And please tell them how they get in touch with you.
Sure. I'm Joel at BritProperties.com. That's my email. And the biggest thing that I think is important to say is that I've been through battles and there are future battles. Nothing is easy. It's not simple. I've heard you say it. It's complicated. There's work to do, and our work is never done. And someone who says, "Yeah, it's easy. Invest. We always make money." They're full of it. So you and I both agree that we have to work hard, and that's the message. It's hard work.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, best book you ever read?
The Four Agreements by Ruiz. Fabulous.
Yeah,
Yeah.
love that book. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Hey, I appreciate you being here this morning. And I would encourage people, if they're looking for something different, if they're looking for some diversification in their portfolio, whether they're in the stock market or whether they're in multifamily. I've had a couple multifamily investors lately say, hey, I need to diversify into something else a little bit. This might be a great vehicle for them.
Yeah, and vice versa. My people who watch this might be interested in what you're doing.
Yeah. So you and I should probably continue to build a little bit of a relationship.
Would love that.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. And everybody, remember, we are here to bring you some twist, somebody who's going to share with you something you don't know and is going to help give you that golden nugget to help build your business. If Joel can do anything for you, don't hesitate to reach out to him. If I can help, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Joel, have a great new year. Good luck in 2024. I look forward to talking with you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you for joining us for another great episode of Insider Secrets. As always, Insider Secrets is brought to you by My Core Intentions. Wherever you hang out on social media, you will find Mike and My Core Intentions. Please like and follow us to get the most up-to-date real estate investing trends. Visit .com, where you can get expert coaching on all things real estate investing and property management. If you're looking to become an expert, Mike's coaching will help you scale your real estate investment business. We're looking forward to having you back again next week for more Insider Secrets.